Welcome everybody, welcome to Photo Plus. Who here is at Photo Plus for the very first time? Awesome, awesome, welcome. This is an awesome show. Really appreciate you guys joining me today specifically. We're going to be talking about portraiture, and I want to give you guys an idea to kind of see how I create the images that I create. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some tips that you can walk away with that will help you with your portrait work. Before I get too far into this, let me ask you guys a question. Who here is seeing and hearing me for the first time? That you have no clue who I am. Awesome. So my name is Miguel Quiles. I've been a professional photographer since 2011. So I'm fairly new to the game. However, had some great opportunities to be able to go and travel the world, photograph amazing people in amazing places. I've been on platforms like Creative Live. I've taught here for several years. I'm a Sony ambassador, and so if you get the opportunity, look me up on Instagram and Facebook so you can get an idea of my work and you can get an idea of the type of stuff that I shoot. I want to talk to you guys about my favorite features and my favorite lenses that I use in my portrait work. And it's kind of funny, I actually didn't have this as part of my talk up until yesterday, because I kind of assumed that the people that looked at my work, I talk about the lenses so often that they already knew and that this would be redundant. But it turns out throughout the morning today, so many people have been asking me about recommendations for lenses for portraiture, and I'm like, I'm glad I added this to my presentation because it's something that needs to be covered. So I have three main lenses that I love to use. If you follow me on social media, I share not just the images, but what lights I use, what camera, what lens, what my settings are. I do behind the scenes videos. I take behind the scenes portraits of the setup so you guys can get an idea of what I do with my portrait work. But you're gonna see a recurring theme every time, and it's the 85 1.8, and it says G. It's actually not a G series lens, it's just their 85 1.8. The 90 millimeter 2.8, it's a macro lens, and then the 100 millimeter 2.8 smooth transition focus lens. These are the top three lenses that I use in my portrait work. So maybe 65–70% of the work that I produce is produced with one of these three lenses. Two of these lenses are so good that I've actually given them nicknames, and I'll kind of talk about this. I'm the type of guy, like if I really like you, you'll have a nickname. So like products are the same way. If I have a lens that I really like and that I really enjoy using, I give it a nickname. And so I'll kind of talk about that here in a moment and why. Let's talk first about that 185, that 85 millimeter 1.8 lens. This is a really awesome lens to be able to shoot the type of portraits that I shoot, which are very close, very tight portraits. And you could do full body with these as well. You could shoot and get a beautiful blurry background if you want to shoot outdoors. To shoot portraits with these lenses, you're able to do that with the 85 and just produce an amazing look. The thing that I like most about this is that it's a little bit forgiving. When you're shooting portraits, sometimes you don't want the sharpest lens available. Sometimes you want one that's sharp, but that is not so sharp that when you get to Photoshop, you just want to kill yourself, that it's just so much detail. The 85 is a very good compromise for a lens that's sharp, but it's not unforgivingly sharp. Unlike this lens, which I said I have two lenses that have nicknames. This is one of them. I nicknamed this lens Excalibur in my camera bag. So anytime I'm shooting, and if I have an assistant and I tell them grab Excalibur for me, this is the lens. And I call it Excalibur because it is one of the sharpest lenses that I've ever used in my entire life. And I've used a lot of different macro lenses from a lot of different brands. This lens is unbelievable. This is not a lens that you're going to use all the time. However, if you want to get what I'm going to call a HD look to your portraits, this 90 macro is going to be the one that you're going to want to reach for. It is the sharpest lens that you could possibly use on the Sony system. And so if you're photographing somebody that has great skin, you know, we're talking about like the 5% of the population. You know, you're not going to use this all the time. But I tell people that as a photographer, we are all like handymen and handy women, right? If I came to your home and I was going to do housework and all I showed up was with one hammer, you knew I would be ill-equipped to be able to do this job, right? This is one tool in a toolbox of lenses that one would use to get great quality portraits. So this 90 macro is one that I pull for when I'm trying to get maximum sharpness, maximum detail in my close-up portraits, and it is unrivaled. The last lens was that 100mm 2.8 STF lens. This lens is just a notch below the 90 macro in terms of sharpness. It's way above the 85, but this one has kind of a different property to it where if you're shooting indoors and you're shooting in studio, it's very sharp. However, if you go outdoors and you want to shoot, for example, like the shot on the left, this was in my parking lot of my studio. It was fall, all the foliage was dead as it is in the fall. And we basically just went out in the parking lot and shot wide open at f2.8, and that was the result. And if you see it really close up, what's amazing is that at f2.8, her skin is completely in focus, totally sharp. You can see every pore, every bit of detail. However, the background is blurred beautifully. So it's a good compromise if you want one lens that you could shoot indoors and get sharp shots and then go outdoors and get a beautiful blurry background but still get a subject that's sharp and in focus. This is the lens to reach for. Now, there's some features that I use in my portraiture all the time, and I want to share my top 6 favorite features that I use for all of my portraits. Pretty much 99% of the time I'm using these, and I'm going to demonstrate these here for you. I actually have Christina, if you guys want to give her a round of applause here. So come on up for us. And she might look familiar because that is her picture on the screen. So the very first thing that I use often, and pretty much every portrait shoot that I do, I use this feature, is the continuous eye autofocus feature in cameras like the A7 III and the A7 R3, which are the two that I use the most often. Now, you're gonna see, and I've seen as I've looked at other camera systems that other brands are saying they have eye autofocus. And I kind of chuckle a little bit because the eye autofocus that I'm used to using works very differently, and I want to demonstrate that for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our live view, and I'm going to give you guys a look at basically what I see when I look through this viewfinder, because if you've used the DSLR and you've never used a mirrorless camera, they're very different in the way that they work. So when you're looking through your viewfinder, you're actually seeing and actually I'll plug it in here. You're actually seeing what kind of amounts to a TV screen. And that TV screen is really powerful because you could see your exposure changes, you can see your white balance changes before you actually take the photograph, which in the DSLR world, it's usually backwards. You have to take the photo and then play it back. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a moment. But as you can see, so a couple quick things too, because I know there's some of you out there that are like me that want to know kind of like what I'm using right now. So I have the Sony A7 III. I have that 85mm 1.8 lens. I'm using a ProPhoto Air remote and a ProPhoto D2, which in my studio, this is my like workhorse light. So probably 99% of the photos that you're seeing on this screen have been taken with this setup. And this is a 4-foot ProPhoto Octa. Now, the background that we're using, it's a beautiful hand-painted backdrop from a company called Gravity Backdrops. If you are into studio photography and you want something that looks really clean and really crisp, they hand paint all of these backdrops and they ship worldwide. If you go to gravitybackdrops.com, you actually have the opportunity to win one of these backdrops. So if you go gravitybackdrops.com, you can subscribe, and they're going to have some information there for you to be able to win one of these backdrops. They're really awesome. So that's what we're going to use today. I'm going to have you take a step forward. It's perfect. And here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to bring this in a little bit closer. And I apologize if I'm covering this TV, but you'll see it. So here on the left TV, you're going to see what I'm seeing through my viewfinder. And I want to show you how amazing continuous eye autofocus is. So we're going to bring this up here. And all I'm doing is I'm just pushing this button on the back of my camera. I'm not even looking at her, right? And what's awesome is that it's able to find the eye in the frame. Now, right now I have it on autofocus single shot. The power is when you bring it to continuous, because when you do that, now what I want you to do is, I want you to kind of go side to side, okay? So you guys notice as she's moving around, that green box is tracking her eye. I'm not doing it the old school way that you would do it with a DSLR, where you have to use your joystick to move the box around. I'm literally talking to you, holding this button, and as she's moving around, her eye is tack sharp and in focus. What's really amazing is I want you to turn around and spin. So, okay, so turn. Okay, and then do it again. So take notice as she turns around, as soon as the eye is back in the frame, it finds the eye, which is really powerful. It's really awesome. This one feature alone had helped me to create portraits that before I wasn't able to capture, just because of the fact that that focusing step would take so long to have to, you know, she would move from pose to pose, I'd have to keep moving the box around. I literally just push the button and it finds the eye and we can shoot. So we're gonna take a quick test shot here. I don't know what my settings are gonna be, so we're gonna dial in some basic settings here and we'll see what we come up with. So 60th of a second, very nice, hold that there. Beautiful. Sometimes we get lucky when we practice quite a bit, so there we go. Beautiful. And again, I'm not looking at my camera, I'm not moving my joystick around, I'm literally looking, I could even look at you guys. Now think about that, if you're shooting with a DSLR, this is not possible. Like it's insanity. So that's one of my favorite features is that continuous eye autofocus. Now we'll switch back here to the PowerPoint here so I can show you my second feature. Perfect. So the second feature that I love to use, and it's actually one that I use in conjunction with this continuous eye autofocus, is what's called the focus hold button. Now this is something that is on Sony lenses. They have it on the regular Sony lenses, the G series and the G Master series. And it's something I get questions about all the time. They'll look at their lens and they're like, Miguel, what's this button do? This button can do a lot. You can actually go into the menu and you can customize it to do a number of different things. You can make it start and stop recording. You can make it access certain options in your menu. But what I do is I utilize that eye autofocus feature and I put it on that button on the lens. So instead of doing back button autofocus the way that most DSLR shooters would do it, I actually just push the button on my lens and it finds the eye in the frame. So you could literally one hand, I'll see if I can do this. So with one hand, I can push that button on the lens and her eye is tack sharp and in focus, regardless of whether I'm shooting at f1.4 or f25. Her eye will be in focus every time. I can literally just frame her up and take a shot. I mean, it is like child's play shooting these portraits. So those two features in conjunction is something that I use all the time, and it opens me up creatively to be able to focus on posing my model, making sure their makeup is good, or if I'm working with a corporate client, because I shoot headshots, to be able to focus on them to make sure that they're comfortable and give me the expressions that I'm looking for. The third feature that I use, and you guys are seeing it, is the EVF, or the electronic viewfinder. It's actually a review. So what we do, I'll see if I can demonstrate this here. So when you're shooting with a DSLR, maybe this looks familiar to you, but when I used to shoot with a DSLR and I would take a portrait, I would dial in my settings based on what the light meter says, and I would look through my viewfinder and I would take a photo. And the first thing I would do is this, right? I would play it back and I'd be looking at my camera, zooming around, making sure that it's in focus. So meanwhile, you guys may not realize this as photographers, but while you're doing this, your subject, your client, your model is standing there watching you, right? So we have to be careful of how our faces look as we're reviewing photos, because I've seen photographers that will do one of these numbers. They're like this, and then they chimp, and they're like, right? They're giving this like crazy expression, and your subjects, your clients are looking at you, and they're not thinking, oh, you're just reviewing the photo and looking at the technical. They're thinking, oh man, they think I look crazy or my hair looks messed up. It's always something negative, and then you have to work your way out of that throughout the photo shoot. What's awesome is I could take a portrait, and notice when I take the picture what happens. So using IAF, you see how it shows the photograph and then it goes back? That is a review. So I keep the camera up to my face, I take the photograph, it shows me the photo that I just took inside of the viewfinder. for 2 seconds, or until I push the shutter halfway and it goes away. That is amazing because I could actually take the picture, keep the camera up to my face the entire time, and what I end up doing is, if I see something where I'm trying to dial in my settings and fix something, I'll keep the camera to my face and I'll be like, Christina, do me a favor, and I'll have the camera like this. I'll say, take your hair on this side and just kind of throw it over your shoulder. And meanwhile, I'm just making adjustments in my camera. The same way that a DSLR shooter would be here doing this, I just do it with the camera up to my face. It's a different psychology, it's a different mentality, because what happens is, she is now the one that is trying to catch up with me, as opposed to her watching and waiting for me to figure out what I'm doing. You look more confident as a photographer, and if you look more confident, you will end up getting better photos. She is not going to be thinking, well, I'm not going to give him my best poses and my best expressions because he doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. You look like you know what you're doing. So like, oh, okay, now I'm going to give him my real poses because I know I'm not wasting my time. So we'll take a couple quick portraits here just to pad, and I'll actually take some. I use a battery grip. So this might look strange in the viewfinder, but let's see. So we'll go, actually it might be kind of hard to do it this way, but yeah, let's not do it that way. Beautiful. And I could even get closer if I want to kind of crop in a little tighter. Very nice. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to disconnect this. We'll go back to my slides here. And Christina, thank you. You can have a seat for a few. So is that cool? Like, I hope that that looked like really easy, because it is really easy. You know, part of me kind of doesn't want to show this process because you see the work and you're like, oh, wow, Miguel, that was great. That's beautiful, your work, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, that's what I'm doing in my studio. Like, it's so painfully easy and you guys could actually do that as well. So the fourth thing that I use all the time, and actually I don't use this all the time, but there's certain scenarios where there's no other way to do what I want to do unless it's with this feature that's found on the A7 III and the A7R III, where you get high frame rate shooting, but you also get high frame rate shooting with a flash. So with the A7 III, I was able to do a editorial. It got published earlier this year. A7 III with that Excalibur lens, the 90 macro. And this was a shot that I could not have gotten if it wasn't for the high frame rate shooting. You see the image with the gold dripping on the face? And you might be thinking, well, I just took the camera and just pushed the button at that exact moment and I got the shot. The reality is, it took me 36 frames. So what I did, and this video is on my YouTube channel, the makeup artist was holding this bottle of gold liquid above the model's head, right out of the frame. And I said, 1, 2, 3, go. And she started dripping this gold on the model's head. And you can kind of see the progression where you see it where it first hits her head and then it just starts to drip down. Out of these 36 images, there was only one shot in that sequence that had the right expression, that had the right amount of liquid that was covering her face. And then she brought her hands in the frame and then she opened her mouth, which it's baby oil. And I felt really bad. I'm like, don't open your mouth, it's baby oil. It doesn't come out easy. But she did it, she's a trooper. So this was a shot that I could not have achieved if it wasn't for the fact that I had that high frame rate shooting. It's a very, very powerful feature. This is another one that I think people talk about this often. You know, we talk about how we need more megapixels and there's this like big race for more megapixels in your cameras. The reality is dynamic range is what is very important in your photographs, whether you're shooting in the studio, whether you're shooting outdoors. And for those of you who don't know, dynamic range is being able to capture the highlights that are in your image while still retaining the data in the shadows. So if that doesn't make sense, and if you can't understand where you would use that, this is how it's used. The photograph that you see on the left was straight out of the camera. That is the raw shot that I took. What I did was I had an umbrella behind the model and I had white V-flats behind me. The light wrapped around her, it hit the white V-flats and it bounced back. And as you can see, it created what I call the LinkedIn profile photo when you first log in. How you don't have a profile photo because it's a silhouette. It's just a silhouette of a person. But you go into post-production, you go into Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One, and you can lift the shadows and all of that data is there. All of that detail is there. This is powerful. This is something where if I wanted to create this image, it's the same shot, just one is lifted up in post. I wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for the dynamic range that I'm using to capture this photo. If not, I'd have to add a second light and light her from the front to get this type of shot. So much easier to just take one light with an umbrella and do it that way. Very, very powerful. Outdoors, it's the same way. You expose for the highlights. So if it's a bright sunny day, expose for that nice blue sky, lift up the shadows, and you have a great picture. The last one, and this one might be controversial for some, we hear people and different brands that are talking about their color science and how amazing their color science is and how it renders skin tones so beautifully and blah, blah, blah. Like, I've heard it for years. And what's funny to me is I've been shooting portraits for years. I photographed very pale people. I photographed very dark people. I photographed people in between, all different shapes, all different sizes, all different ages, and the skin tones and the colors look phenomenal. You guys can see this is kind of a subset of my work, and you see different faces, different people, different skin tones. But the one thing that is the same across the board is that the colors are phenomenal, and the colors look great. Whether I'm shooting bright pastels or I'm shooting darker tones, I'm able to capture all of that detail in these raw files, and the camera doesn't make the decision for me. It doesn't say, we're gonna make very red, saturated skin tones. You can make the skin tones exactly the way that you want. And that's what I want as a professional photographer. I don't want the camera making decisions for me. As an artist, I want to tell the camera, this is what I want. And these Sony cameras that I use allow me to do that. So in closing, if you guys have not seen my work before, this is my social media information. I would invite you guys to take a photograph of it. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, follow me on YouTube especially, because anybody like free stuff? Hopefully. So there's a ton of free tutorials on my YouTube channel. I teach off-camera lighting, different products. So definitely check me out on YouTube. Comment as well, because I always keep up with everyone through the comment section. But thank you so much for joining me here at Photo Plus. I'm really honored that you guys took the time this morning to join me, and I'll kind of hang out if you guys have questions, but enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.